Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Erin.
And welcome to Between Two Filing Cabinets, where we bring you tips, trends, troubles, and stories from HR. And this week, we wanted to talk about trust in the workplace. And Erin, you and I were both reading an article about Google, and they did a study on what makes the teams most effective and what makes great teams. It's a really good article. I think that came from Business Insider. That was just sort of a summary of that. And what they concluded that what matters most to having an effective and great team is trust. And so when I read through that article, it reminded me of some of the things that you talked about in our leadership and supervisory classes about sources of power and how that influences people's leadership style. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I do think it's relevant to the trust issue. And not surprisingly, the trust is such a big distinguisher about productivity in teams. I mean, Lencioni's been saying that for a long time, but it's nice to have some very fresh data that supports it. And so one of the things that we do talk about in Leadership Engagement Essentials, and pretty much all of our leadership courses, is that there's 3 sources of power that you have as a leader. And the first one is that position power. Right. Authoritative power, right? That because I said so type of power, kind of almost like parenting. An example might be Jack Welch. Very much, I'm going to tell you what to do. He's the one who invented the rank and yank for performance management. And I mean, he was very, successful at it because he did turn around numbers, but very much a kind of position power guy. Right. Second one would be more of your knowledge power. So even if maybe you don't even have position power, maybe we're colleagues, I don't really have anything over you necessarily. Mm-hmm. If I asked you to do something, you might do it by the nature of your trust in my knowledge or expertise.
Right.
A leader maybe to think of that way would be Steve Jobs. So what he said, was worth so much to what people said because he had such a gift, such an entrepreneurial spirit. He understood marketing.
Right.
And so even if someone without that kind of position power comes along, you're like, we're going to do what that person says because they know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then that third source of power, and I think it's the most underutilized and really goes towards that trust issue, is relationship power.
Yeah.
How are you building relationships with your people? And perhaps a good example, kind of modern day, might be Howard Schultz of Starbucks. He really seems to care about his employees. In fact, I was reading just a little while ago that an employee had complained about the impact of her schedule on a social media platform. And kind of like the Glassdoor one we were talking about, right, people get all panicked, right? And they want to, squash that. And you could see this person potentially getting in trouble. And instead, the culture is so people-oriented that the response was to sit down with her and be like, oh my God, we had no idea that this was going on. How can we make your schedule more manageable? And that happened within days. And it really wasn't very public in that sense. Like it wasn't done with that in mind. It's just very relationship centered. So the idea being that even if you don't have position power, right? Or even if you are new, so you don't have knowledge power, let's say, you haven't proven yourself yet. If you're working to establish those relationships with people and you say, hey, I'd like to give this a try, chances are people are going to go with you there. And so I really like to recommend, especially if you want to build that trust, really leverage that relationship power, beef it up with some knowledge, that expertise power. And of course, occasionally that kind of position power might come into play.
Right.
But really leading from that relationship muscle and building that with people, I think it's essential for kind of creating that kind of trust and therefore getting those kinds of deliverables.
Yeah. And so especially people that are sort of new to supervision, do you see that they rely on one of those more than the other?
Yeah, I think luckily, I think that there's kind of an innate sense that they need to, get in there with their people, kind of build a relationship with them. And I think that too often new managers and really established managers too, because no one's really learning this. Usually we're just thrown into leadership positions, aren't taking the time to say why they're asking people to do things or what kind of the importance is. And they're really missing that opportunity because relationships don't organically happen without an actual investment. And so I think a lot of times new supervisors aren't really sure how to really make that investment or get the ball rolling.
Right. And I think sometimes if you start with that relationship piece, then it kind of flows to the other things of that you have that expertise and the buy-in because of that expertise and experience. And maybe at some point you do also have that authority, power. But yeah, it seems like, I think with a lot of the people that are new to supervision, they're relying on their expertise. And that's why they've gotten promoted. And so then they're in that position of authority. And so they're using that position power and that maybe that authority, that knowledge, expertise to do the heavy lifting. And they're using that to lean into rather than focusing on that relationship.
Absolutely. And sometimes actually entry-level supervisors particularly tend to shy away, especially if they've come up in that organization, because they might feel like, oh gosh, these people were my friends and now I have this authority. And so they might pull back almost to kind of shore up their credibility, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I think, when, we've been going through March and looking at our awards for best worst place and best worst boss award, those types of things. I know we have a couple of good examples for also, showing the lack of trust. You had a good example that you wanted to share.
Yeah, this was pretty bad, as all of our examples, but that basically in one employee setting, they had to submit a request. It was actually like a button on their computer every time they wanted to use the lavatory. So anytime they would use the restroom, they had to submit a request. And this one particular person said that, sometimes you wouldn't get an immediate response, but nine times out of 10, the response was no.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm guessing that there are some underlying problems maybe that were causing that to happen. But yeah, I'd say that shows some lack of trust.
Yeah.
Probably not a very effective team. I don't think they would meet Google's standards.
No, I don't think so. Not a lot of trust, and also not a lot of relationship building.
Not leading from that relationship at all. Well, good. I think it's such a good tip to keep in mind of kind of where and when it's appropriate to use that. Always starting with that relationship and then lean on the others, at an appropriate time. Those aren't necessarily your dominant sources there, when I think a lot of times in reality, people are leading from that. So I think there's some really great tips to follow. So let's file this one under trust, and we will catch you next time. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks.